I don't do a lot of response videos. I certainly don't do them for Charlie Kirk, because when he's debating, typically he's debating somebody that I'm going to disagree with, and therefore there's really no reason for me to put up a response video, because in those circumstances I agree with him. But in this circumstance, he actually decided to take on a young libertarian. This young libertarian doesn't have the depth of experience or hasn't been challenged enough in his ideologies to be able to really push back properly against Charlie Kirk. So I thought it would be fun if I took the place of this libertarian in this debate with Charlie Kirk and responded on his behalf. So let's bring it up and get started here.
Let me tell you what I'm libertarian on, and then you tell me. I'll tell you what I'm not libertarian on, and then we can find out where we disagree. Is that cool? I'm very libertarian on guns. I think that people have a God-given inalienable right to own weapons, and that the Second Amendment shall not be infringed, and that without the Second Amendment, you don't have a First Amendment, a Third Amendment, a Fourth Amendment, and the Second Amendment is God-given. We agree on that, right? I believe that the government should be severely restrained in its spying, its capacity to be able to monitor our private communications. I think you should get a warrant before that you ever are able to spy in communications, and I think the FISA statute should be completely repealed, and I think it's abused by politicians too much. Finally, I think we largely agree on war. I think the Iraq war was a mistake. The Afghanistan war was a mistake. I think us sending money to Ukraine is a total mistake, and I think that this experiment in the American empire has been terrible and awful. Let me tell you what I'm not libertarian on, okay? I'm not libertarian on immigration. I do not think that we should have open borders and invite the people of every country around the world to come here while our own citizens are suffering and not able to get ahead as much as their parents, right? So that's where I'm not libertarian. Secondly, and then I'll let you respond, I'm not libertarian on drug legalization. I think that our moving towards drug legalization that starts with marijuana and eventually cocaine and then psychedelics and then heroin has been very bad for society. It increases crime. I do not like this idea that you drive every corner and there's marijuana clinics in every corner. I don't think that it has improved the well-being or the soul of this nation. So on those two things, I'm not libertarian. Please respond.
Do drugs cause crime, or does the drug war cause crime?
Well, people cause crime, but you also must understand what you do from a policy perspective. Just using prudence and not abstractions is what I am doing, improving the livelihood of my people.
Okay, so here's where Charlie starts to get a little off track. So he's obviously, people commit crimes. He starts talking about the drug war. This kid asks a really good question, which is, do drugs cause crime, or does the drug war cause crime? Charlie doesn't really answer that question. It gets a little philosophical here, but then has a big swing and a miss.
Or is it hurting the livelihood of my people? And I could be honest, I don't know, maybe you guys disagree, but since the legalization of weed in a lot of Western states, I do not think it's increased the quality of life out West. You could disagree, though.
Maybe not for the people in jail who are incarcerated for nonviolent drug.
I think that's a good argument.
Crimes.
Those are actually two different things, though. Decriminalizing something in the sense of how you enforce it, I can agree with, but then legalizing it so that a 19-year-old can go get a bunch of weed on the street corner. We were told a couple things when it came to the drug war. We were told that usage rates would go down. We were told that the cartel would get super poor and that it would like bankrupt the cartel. And we were told that it would not increase crime in the areas. None of those three things actually happened.
We didn't end the drug war. We never ended the drug war. It's still going on right now.
No, I know. So is it your perspective to decriminalize all drugs?
Yes.
Okay. So including heroin?
Absolutely.
I got it. So do you think San Francisco is a good example of drug policy?
San Francisco isn't a good example of policy in general. Charlie's getting ready to wrap up a bunch of issues that San Francisco has and kind of pretend like all these other economic factors don't play a role in what's going on in San Francisco. And this just has to do with their drug decriminalization policies. And by the way, it's a lack of enforcement, as he says, but just listen to what he says, how he tries to take all of San Francisco's problems and lay them at the feet of drugs.
No.
All drugs are legal in San Francisco.
I don't know if that's the case.
No, it is.
It doesn't matter, because Charlie Kirk's making the same stupid argument, or debating from the same position that most liberals will debate from when it comes to economics, which is a single cause issue, right? African Americans have lower income than their white counterparts, therefore racism. There is no other cause. This is a multi-cause issue. There's a gender pay gap, therefore sexism, right? Charlie Kirk's making an argument. He doesn't like drugs. So lots and lots of crime, therefore drugs. He's not looking at any other possible issues or discussing any of the other economic factors at play.
I could literally, you and I could get in a car right now, and you and I can get morphine, we can get heroin or fentanyl on the side of the street and shoot up together and watch the sunset over the Golden Gate Bridge.
With the cops. What? Just like right next to us, just hang.
Okay, so he's stating, like, this is a matter of policy. Here's something you and I can do. Okay, that's a standalone fact.
No, not only that, the state gives you the drugs.
Okay, issue number one. The state gives you the drugs. Okay, well, that's not decriminalization or legalization. That is supplying. that's being the distributor. So the idea that the state, if the state's handing out these drugs, these highly addictive, highly dangerous drugs, they're keeping people who otherwise would not be able to obtain these drugs addicted to the drug.
And the needles. Did you know that?
They're supplying it to people who they would otherwise not be able to obtain it in an effort. This is such backward, stupid policy, in an effort to reduce the drug-related crime that actually comes from the drug war.
That's libertarianism at play, though, my friend.
It's not libertarian. How is the state handing out drugs using taxpayer money to distribute drugs a libertarian policy?
So San Francisco has embraced libertarian.
The government does not have any responsibility to distribute drugs.
Oh, hey, nice. He caught it.
Fair enough. Fine. But it's not just, it's an extreme. They distribute drugs in San Francisco. In Portland, they don't enforce any drug laws. Now, I think you guys can all agree the dirtiness and the lack of safety in San Francisco, Portland, Seattle should be a cautionary tale that maybe widespread drug legalization is a really, really bad idea.
Maybe a lot of policies in that city are a really, really bad idea. Maybe the policies of that city attract a particular type of person. I have never been to Portland, so I can't even speak on what Portland's like. I heard it sucks. But my understanding is the way that Portland is the way that people of Portland like Portland to be. But again, we're talking about a single issue here. Decriminalization solely.
Do you guys agree?
So the condition of Portland is based solely on, in his opinion, drug decriminalization. There's nothing else. There are no other policies in play in Portland or San Francisco that we could point to and go, this might also be a problem.
What is your response to that?
I don't have any response to that because I don't have the data on hand.
Fair enough. But this is not a data argument, though. Just take a road trip. I want you to drive through San Francisco, Portland, and Seattle anytime in the next couple of years. I want you to think about this conversation.
He has made his entire argument is a correlation as causation argument. They've decriminalized drugs, therefore this thing is happening. That's correlation as causation.
And ask yourself, is this the best we can do as a country? And is what we are doing working? Here's my perspective. We're the wealthiest country ever, where the young ladies in this audience probably don't feel safe walking the streets of San Francisco at night.
So he's talking about a different type of criminality now, right? He's talking about SA, after dark.
Nor should you, right? And I think, not even here, yeah. And by the way, what a moral failure that you can't walk your own cities at night. People say, Charlie, what are your politics? How about this? I want to be able to walk every major American
So what he's talking about is a fear of violent crime.
city at night and enjoy it like my parents did and not have to worry about being raped, mugged, or shut down. And like whatever it takes to get that done, let's do that thing.
Yeah, so the crowd is cheering because he's saying, hey, our streets should be safe. Wow, what a difficult argument to make. There's not a pathway there. He's just stating something that everybody in the country, left, right, center, libertarian, yes, we want safe streets. Congratulations. Brilliant point, Charlie.
I think a partial solution to that is just more guns. I mean, if in California it wasn't illegal to own a gun.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I can't agree with the kid on this one.
I do agree with that, sort of, but I think at some point, if people are showing a pattern of crime, they shouldn't be on the street, right? So if they're dealing drugs and smashing windows and...
Dealing drugs and smashing windows are not the same thing. Smashing a window is a crime that involves a victim. Selling a product and engaging in a voluntary transaction are not. So pay close attention to how he shifts this argument.
They're holding up, whatever, 7-Elevens. You should be in jail for a long time for those things. And what San Francisco, Portland, and Seattle have done is that they have no cash bail, they decriminalized it, and you could get out the same day you commit a crime.
And there you go. So now he's gotten to the cause. He's gotten to the actual cause of the lack of safety. The issues that he actually has with these cities isn't based on drug decriminalization. It's the fact that they don't keep violent criminals incarcerated. They've changed their shoplifting laws and their laws around theft and larceny. That essentially it's not a crime unless it's over $900. They've eliminated cash bail, and they're allowing violent criminals, people who've committed real violent crimes, where there is an identifiable victim, back on the streets. And he's correlating that set of policy back to the fact that they decriminalize drugs. The other thing, like I said, is that the state is distributing the drugs to people who probably otherwise wouldn't be able to obtain them. That's why they are being distributed by the state, which is a mistake,
And again, I just think that this is not even political, but I guess the Republican Party is now the ambassador of this. It's so simple that if you don't feel safe in your own great cities, your leaders have failed you and they should all be fired. Thank you. One more thought?
One more thought about tariffs. I want to go back to my original
Sure,
question.
I'm very much in favor of tariffs, yeah.
So Charlie Kirk is not a free market guy, and he's going to make a terrible argument around tariffs here.
The costs are ultimately passed down to the consumer.
Not always. It's interesting.
So I've had this argument with Democrats on the corporate tax, had this argument with Republicans on tariffs. And it's amazing to me how we just can't see past our ideological beliefs. We so want our team to be right with what they're doing that we'll do all these gymnastics to prove that the thing that we like, it's not even the thing we like. I guarantee you, if Joe Biden had thrown a 25% tariff, 10% tariff, whatever, on the entire world, Republicans would have been losing their minds and screaming free market left and right. Okay. So he's going to defend tariffs here. And this is brilliant. His gymnastics are pretty good.
Oh, why are pickup trucks so much cheaper in America than they are in Europe?
No idea.
Because they're made here. You know.
That's not true. So the first thing he does is lie. American pickup trucks are way more expensive in Europe because Europe has a ton of trade walls in between us and being able to sell our trucks over there. From a regulatory perspective, there's just a lot of reasons other than the fact that we make them here that makes them cheaper. That doesn't even make sense. If we could sell stuff cheaper that we made domestically, okay? If manufacturing domestically made corporations able to sell products cheaper here, then there wouldn't be any need to bring manufacturing back here because it never would have left. If we can produce and distribute the products and allow them to be cheaper by doing it in the United States of America, why would I move my factory overseas and re-import the goods, and by doing so have to charge more for the service? That doesn't even make any sense.
You know that we heavily tariff pickup trucks more than any other car coming into the country? So how do you avoid a tariff? You could hear. So what tariffs do is they're forcing functions for overseas companies to build factories here.
Okay, so he had to tell lie number one about why things are cheaper in the United States, why pickup trucks are cheaper in the US than they are in Europe. So that's a lie. So then he says they put a tariff on, but if the trucks are cheaper because they build them here, then why do you have to put a tariff on against imported goods? So then he talks about we're forcing a function, which is bringing the labor back in the United States. This doesn't make any sense. Either it's cheaper to manufacture and distribute products by building them here, as his initial point was, or you have to put a tariff on it to make manufacturing in the United States competitive, which destroys his first point, because you're forcing manufacture of a good that's being produced in a place that can produce and distribute it cheaper than by doing it here to do it back here and incur the costs here, which raises the price for consumers. Whether you're moving the manufacturing back here or not, if you're doing it through tariffs, you are eliminating the efficiency that's being created through importing a cheaper good and making it more expensive to manufacture the good here, therefore making it more expensive for consumers. This isn't complicated stuff, and he's being incredibly disingenuous, or he's not qualified to speak on the topic.
See, you're only looking at tariffs through a one-dimensional DC Chamber of Commerce lens.
And he's talking about this kid is looking at it through a one-dimensional lens, which is ridiculous.
The way that you tell a company, oh, avoid the tariff, build the factory in Nevada. And so, for example, you guys probably, any parents own a Toyota pickup truck? Anybody? They're actually pretty good, yeah? Look at, there's a couple hands. Toyota builds all their pickup trucks here, and they avoid the 25% tariff.
Okay. So they build their pickup trucks here and they avoid the 25% tariff. They're only building their pickup trucks here then by that premise because they have to avoid this 25% tariff. In the absence of the tariff, it would be cheaper to build them in Japan and ship them to the United States, therefore having a lower cost for the consumer.
So it's not a tax. It actually incentivizes homeland production and more.
That's great. All right. The two things are not, you can incentivize homeland production, great. But you can't make the argument that the one thing has nothing to do with the other. Homeland production and costs to the consumer are those two things get settled differently.
For jobs for our country, and actually the price doesn't get passed on to the consumer.
I think hands down, deregulation.
I tend to agree with that, but I also want to live in the real world, not fantasy world. And I think that also fundamentally.
So this gentleman says deregulation, and Democrats make a ton of arguments about deregulation, that we can talk about it. The fact that there's the registry, the number of regulations and regulatory entities that exist in this country is ridiculous. It adds a massive amount of cost. You can do I'll do a whole nother video on that.
You have a social contract to your people. that, for example,
There's no such thing as a social contract.
if we have critical vitamin needs in this country, most of our drugs are made in China. That's bad. Okay, like we don't have to overthink it. You don't need a chart. You don't need a graph. Bad that we don't make our own drugs.
Fair enough. That's fair. There's things that we should make in America. There's things we should prioritize producing in the United States of America. So how about if you're a drug manufacturer, not just not big pharma, but the manufacturers who move these plants, that none of that manufacturer is subject to tax. None of the profits from that is subject to tax. How quickly, you don't need a tariff. You don't need a new tax. Eliminate the tax. Eliminate the cost of doing business and that cost associated with doing business in the United States, and then see what happens.
Okay, that 90% of all vitamin C is made in China. You need vitamin C to live. Literally, it's ascorbic acid. Make it here. So anyway, we could agree to disagree on that. I think tariffs are great forcing functions, especially if you're a wealthy country. Tariffs are really good if you're wealthy and the incumbent power.
Okay.
God bless you. Are you voting for Trump?
Terrible.
Who are you voting for? Chase Oliver?
This is the part that really drives me nuts. First of all, I didn't vote for Chase Oliver. I can go into lots of reasons. And a lot of libertarians didn't. You can see by the fall off from the last election to this election. But I want you to listen to what Charlie Kirk has to say here.
Why?
He's the best candidate on the field for sure.
So you're going to vote for someone who can't win?
Yes, because my vote doesn't matter anyway.
But if your vote doesn't matter, why vote at all?
So both of them are wrong in his point. And I'm going to close out on this. Your vote matters. Saying your vote doesn't matter because you're voting for somebody who can't win doesn't make any sense. What you're saying then is no Democrat living in a blue state should vote, and no Republican living in no Democrat living in a red state should bother voting, and no Republican living in a blue state should bother voting. That's not how voting works. Voting isn't about this kid brings up the 5% thing and trying to get matching federal funds for the Libertarian Party. That's not even it. Voting is how you let the government know. Voting is how you let the politicians know what it is you actually want. You keep going to McDonald's and buying Big Macs. You're telling McDonald's that you like Big Macs. You keep showing up to the polls and voting for the same garbage candidates over and over again. You're telling the two parties, keep sending me these garbage candidates. The idea that you shouldn't vote for somebody who can't win is ridiculous. And it is the definition of your vote doesn't matter. You have to let the political elite know, I'm actually willing to walk away from you. And that takes courage, because if I go out and I say I'm a libertarian, which I do to a lot of people, I will get blamed by the left at this point for Trump winning, and we got blamed for Biden winning by the right. The fact of the matter is, I don't care. I'm not going to vote for somebody with whom I do not share a significant amount of value. I don't share enough values with Donald Trump or beliefs to have voted for him. And the same applies with Kamala Harris. The same applied to Chase Oliver in this last election. We just don't quite have enough in common. I even worked on his campaign for a while, but I ended up kind of fading away from that and not voting for him. So I'm more of anyway, I don't want to get into my own personal belief system at this point, but the fact of the matter is voting is critical, and quote, voting for whatever, not voting for one of the two predominant parties in this country because the third party candidate can't win is essentially telling the voter, it doesn't matter what you think. Your opinion doesn't matter, and you shouldn't voice your real beliefs. You're never going to get better politics that way.